Hello and welcome to the Inner Sense channel, where we explore the fascinating world of inner body awareness, also known as interoception, and its impact on our well-being. Today, I'm so excited to have Saga Briggs join us for a really, what I hope to be an insightful conversation. Saga is a freelance journalist with a background in psychology and neuroscience. She's written extensively on interoception and research into psychedelics, with her work published in prestigious outlets such as Scientific American and Aeon and Psyche. Saga holds a postgraduate degree in psychology, neuroscience and mental health from King's College London, and a Bachelor of Arts in creative writing and psychology from Oberlin College. Saga is also the author of the upcoming book, which I'm really looking forward to seeing, called How to Change Your Body. I'm very much looking forward to this conversation because I hope to hear about some of Saga's personal experiences with interoceptive awareness, as well as her research findings that she encountered when writing the book. So please do remember to subscribe to the Inner Sense channel if you want to hear more about inner body awareness and how we can use it as a tool to enhance our life. And without further ado, let's give Saga a warm welcome. Hello, Saga.
Hello, happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. It was quite a few months ago, and it was a collaborator of mine, Dr. Jane Aspel, who researches interoception, and actually contact with her actually probably led to the creation of this YouTube channel, or catalyzed it. So we have her to thank. And I'd like to start with finding out a little bit more about your background and career journey. So you've done so much fascinating, well, what I find writing on fascinating topics, and specifically focusing on science communication and the literary arts. So how did your career begin, and how has your sort of educational background influenced your interest in interoception and psychedelic science?
Yeah, so I would say it's been a bit of an unconventional journey. I did study creative writing and psychology initially. So I studied poetry, fiction, nonfiction, along with psychology. And so I kind of began thinking that I would become like a freelance editor for a literary journal. And then I got a job as a managing editor for a digital publication that connects teachers and students with educational psychology research. And I stayed in that role for many years. So that was quite a lot of science communications, some journalism as well, interviewing a lot of educators and psychologists. And I really enjoyed kind of digging into the dense research and figuring out a way to communicate it in a way that's digestible to a general audience. So most of my experience initially was kind of in the psychology world, doing that. And over time, I kind of got interested in mental health and mental health sciences. And part of that is sort of related to the psychology background, but I would say most of it is really just my lived experience, becoming interested on a personal level. And so when I moved to Berlin, I live in Berlin now, in 2018, that was kind of the year that psychedelic science entered the mainstream awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I sort of pivoted at that point into the mental health reporting, I guess you could say. And then sort of pivoted into interoception research at that point.
So yeah, you sort of explained there how you really enjoy trying to find a way to communicate science in a way that's understandable to people, and it helps them. It really is a sort of, from my point of view, a translation exercise, because the jargon that is created, and I mean that in a positive way, that the vocabulary that's created within the scientific community can feel like a completely new language. And even the word interoception didn't exist many years ago but we have to kind of see what utility it has and how helpful it is for people in everyday context. So I kind of really appreciate what you're doing in that work to try and help people through making science understandable. So you mentioned there about sort of personal experience and how since sort of 2018 you've really kind of your sort of career pivoted around when the psychedelic science started to become more popular, and then you've moved on to interoception. So can you share maybe a personal experience of when your own interoceptive awareness has played a significant role in your life and maybe helped in some way with decision making or relationships?
Yeah, this question is sort of like, where do I begin? It's really helped me immensely over the past, I don't know, 6 years, I would say. Like before I even realized there was an interoception field, like that it was a research field. Yeah, it sort of, I guess, like becoming more in tune with my body became a priority around 2018, because I was kind of struggling at that time with a lot of anxiety and working through an alcohol dependence, actually. And really kind of somehow discovered independently of all of the research that like cultivating body trust and putting myself in social situations where I just relied on myself entirely without a substance really, really helped over time to kind of calm me down and make me feel more grounded. So once I discovered that there was an entire research field around this topic, it really, yeah, of course, I had like the personal interest already. And so I kind of just became really passionate about going down a rabbit hole with all of that. But yeah, generally, I think it's helped in a lot of ways, like with emotion regulation, for example. One specific example would be I feel like at this point, I'm sort of able to kind of press pause between a bodily sensation and an emotion state. Once a sensation arises in any context, like day-to-day life, there's sort of a moment where you have a feeling before it becomes a full-blown state of being, and yeah, since sort of cultivating more interoceptive awareness in myself, I'm able to do that better, to kind of press pause. And yeah, with decision making, I think it's become really useful as well. We have this kind of like cultural narrative around going with your guts and following your instincts, whatever that means scientifically. I think we're still figuring that out, but I've found that just experimenting with that has been really interesting. And yeah, kind of just waiting for this open feeling when I'm in the process of making a decision, like a major life decision, just waiting for just a feeling that things are right. So those would be two examples of how it's helped really in day-to-day life. Yeah.
So the sort of social situations, and you gave the example of a social situation where you notice before you maybe not you didn't do anything necessarily with the body sensations, they just had the life of their own maybe, whereas now you're able to create that pause or gap between noticing something in your body and it becoming like an overwhelming or a kind of something that's going to drive whatever you do next.
Exactly.
That's really and good to hear that you acknowledge the sort of or that it was the finding out about the science and the research. It almost sounds like it made it more, it encouraged you to take this approach more seriously, to explore yourself more seriously.
Yeah, I mean, also, then I started reading about social interoception, which is a really interesting area within the interoceptive literature. And so that really resonated as well, you know.
So with social interoceptions, I'm thinking for the benefit of the people listening to this, how would you describe that? So that I'm guessing that means between people, more than one person, the role of interoception in.
Right. Yeah. So it would be, you know, in any relational context. So having a conversation with a friend over coffee and paying attention to what's going on inside your body, but then also noticing their reactions, their words, and sort of how that makes you feel. And so it's sort of like a dynamic interplay between two people. And yeah, there are two neuroscientists, Andy Arnold and Karen Dobkins, who have done amazing work in this area, and they recommend a practice called flexible switching, which is sort of trying to balance out the interoceptive and exteroceptive input, which you're constantly getting both of these things and trying to sort out which is which. And so they've done a lot of great work in that area, and I was reading their work at the time.
What's it called? What switching?
Flexible switching.
Flexible switching.
Or attentional switching would be another name for it. Yeah.
Okay, I'll look into that. And I'm not familiar with those two. Are they researchers or therapists or both?
They're both neuroscientists. Karen Dobkins teaches psychology at University of California, San Diego, and Andy Arnold is actually, I think, at Royal Holloway, doing his postdoc there.
Well, they sound like they're interesting to look into, and it's reminded me a little bit of the work of Stephen Porges, and also the somatic experiencing type therapy, where it is, you know, it's just acknowledging that as well as the cues from, you know, changes in noise and events that are happening around us, it can be the, you know, the tones of voice or the facial expressions that people are making, or their gestures that affect our moment to moment, are affecting our inner experience. And, you know, how do we, as you say, it's this continual reciprocal process. And I like that idea of switching as well, to say it's almost as if we can, switching is sort of having some say on how much of which we pay attention to. So yeah, I'll definitely look at that.
Yeah, just, I mean, because if you're too focused on yourself in an exchange, that can be a problem. You might be just overwhelmed by your own sensations and not really being present with the other person. And on the other hand, if you're only paying attention to the other person, then you're out of touch with how you really feel, and you can't really have an authentic connection in the moment then.
Fantastic. So your book, which is out next month in America, did you say?
Yes.
September in America, okay. And elsewhere in Europe, it's next year, is it? Early next year?
Early January. Yeah, it should be available in bookstores in Europe. Early January.
Okay, and I'll put a link to the publisher's website in the notes for this interview. Whilst you were researching for the book, you've already mentioned a little bit of the what you've learned with attentional switching, but what are the other surprising or intriguing things that you came across whilst researching interoception?
So one area I'm really interested in is a part of the brain called the insular cortex, which I'm sure you know all about. But the book actually evolved from an essay that was going to be just about the insular cortex. And so for people who don't know, this is kind of a part of the brain that's tucked within a fissure. It's sort of really difficult for neuroscientists to reach, but it's modulates interoception. So it's the interoceptive network is mostly located there. And yeah, it's just a really interesting part of the brain because it has this relevance to the body, but also it plays a role in social, emotional, everyday life. And there are also these neurons called the von Economo neurons that are located there, which are these specialized neurons that are only in highly social creatures. So humans, elephants, I believe, whales. So I found this really interesting that this part of the brain is sort of plays a role in both of these processes. You know, it's very involved in empathy as well, feeling into another person's experience. So that really sort of, yeah, I had sort of a light bulb moment when I was reading about that, and also just the clinical literature and how the insula is oftentimes altered in various disorders. So yeah, there's just something quite fascinating, I think, about the intersection of the body and social cognition, and you kind of can't separate the two. So that's one area that I found really interesting to dive into.
Yeah, thank you. And that's reminded me, a few of the other people we've had on this channel have talked about the sort of social co-regulation and Lisa Feldman Barrett calls it body budgeting for the individual level, but I know we've had Manos Tiskaris on here who's talked about like the body politic as well, how we kind of regulate each other's energy levels and emotional state in all sizes of community. So yeah, it is quite mysterious, isn't it? This sort of way in which two people or more than two people, it can get very fuzzy between what I'm feeling and what I think is going on
Yes.
around me, and what my behavior is and what I think the group's behavior is. And I guess you know, it sounds like this part of the insular cortex and these special cells, if they're only present in social animals, maybe that's the sort of glue that holds packs of animals together. The fact that we can bond and see each other as an extension of ourselves almost, or an extension of our extension of our inner self.
Right. Yeah, I think that can be a good thing and a bad thing, depending on the situation. You don't want to be so empathetic that you combine your experience with someone else's and can't really tell the difference. And when I was speaking with Andy Arnold for the book, actually, he mentioned that there's some research to suggest that people who have better interoception have a better self-other distinction, actually, which doesn't preclude like having compassion for someone. In fact, it might aid in compassion because you don't sort of get completely sucked into someone else's emotional experience that you can't be helpful to them. You can sort of stay grounded in your own energy while assisting them as well.
Yeah. Yeah, in the sort of therapeutic world, I often hear people saying it's important to know what's mine and what's yours, and they're talking about emotional charge in that context.
Right.
And so, you know, I hear these sentiments coming through from the therapy community, and now it sounds like we've got a sort of a more agreed on biological explanation of what's really happening, or neuroscience explanation in terms of how a person's feelings, if that relates to their, that their it's the work of Lisa Barrett's lab on interoception and allostasis. It's how we regulate and plan and budget what we're going to do into the future. How that relates to the overall kind of collective budget of a group. But yeah, it also intrigues me as well about when that can be a useful thing and a not so useful thing. And you obviously we can see examples of when group and crowd behavior goes bad with mobs and riots and that sort of stuff, or maybe whole cities or wars, that sort of thing. It's when there's some collective decision that might lead to an overall harm for the wider community. So how do you see that all of this knowledge can be used to sort of inform therapeutic approaches, or be used in education, maybe in schools, to help society? Because you are a communicator and an educator, how do you see that it could filter in into the world more broadly?
Well, I think it already is to a certain degree. I think there are a lot of programs and interventions and therapies that are interoceptive, but we just don't use that term for them. So somatic therapy, for example, I think is already it's an area that's kind of picking up in popularity. People are sort of realizing that there's more to life than what's between the ears. There's so much to be investigated down here. So yeah, somatic therapies. There's also, seems like there's been kind of an uptick in mindfulness trainings over the past few years. And I think there are a lot of overlaps between interoception and mindfulness. So possibly, you could use kind of the same approach or structure that sort of mindfulness trainings are using to kind of promote better interoception. But yeah, I mean, I feel like this should be taught in schools from a young age. So it's that important. There are occupational therapists who are doing this. I don't know if you've spoken to Kelly Mahler, but she would be a great person to have on the podcast. She's been doing a lot of work with school-aged kids.
It's incredible with the interoception curriculum, and
yeah,
I've spoken a few times. So yeah, I agree. If that her work, she's done amazing work. So if that could grow and spread more, that would be a great thing.
Yeah, and I would just add to that I think kind of the special thing to me about interoception is really this body trust aspect of it. And in a way, it's kind of antithetical to a lot of the systems that we have in place, actually. Like, I just think of, kind of like mindfulness workshops at Amazon, like for corporate employees, and how that's sort of become, potentially a way to gaslight people into greater productivity and not listening to their bodies. So I think we have an opportunity to actually change some of the structures, some of the systems that are in place to hand power back to people in terms of listening to their own body and their own kind of inner voice in terms of how they want to approach their life.
Yeah, I've heard a few people commenting and quoting, leaders of big companies saying that all leaders should train in mindfulness so that they can increase the productivity of their workforce.
Yeah, sneaky, right?
Yes.
Sounds good on the surface.
Sounds good. Yeah. So, well, yeah, the business is going to be more successful. Everyone's going to be happier. But yeah, it sort of goes back to this question: is this what humanity wants more widely? Is this what is good for the planet? And so on.
Right.
Interesting. There was a meeting by I don't know if you've heard of the Center for Humane Technology. It was behind the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma.
Okay.
They've recently done a longer sort of seminar on the AI dilemma, but they're now going down the route of embodiment and empathy, and saying that how can we approach the challenges of technology and AI by encouraging people to tune into their body, and at least kind of be aware of that as they're communicating about these topics. So it's really, I think it is does sound more and more people are taking this approach.
Yeah, that's hopeful overall. I think it's generally a really good thing.
So do you have any kind of feel for the trends in interoception research? What work is being done at the moment? What there's more of? Is it kind of all sort of neuroimaging based, or is it more looking at behavior? Did you discover anything about that from your research?
That's a good question, actually. Yeah, as far as I can tell, it's neuroimaging based, but I find it really interesting, kind of what you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation in terms of, you know, does the body really keep the score? Is there such thing as emotional blockage in the body itself? I think that's kind of the next frontier as far as I can tell. And then also figuring out kind of like better measures for interoception. Like I think right now it's mainly the heartbeat detection that's being used the most, but yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it does seem like it's quite a kind of young field of research, isn't it? And still trying to find out what are the best ways to measure interoceptive awareness, and to categorize different channels of awareness, and what might be the best sort of subjective measures, and the best sort of more device-based measures. So
right. I mean, I guess the point is that there are multiple channels, coinciding at the same time. So measuring something like heartbeat detection is maybe, one small piece in the puzzle. But yeah, I would be interested to see how research unfolds with, the peripheral systems. So like not just the brain, but what is going on? Are there physiological changes happening in the body that are corresponding to the changes happening in the brain? And what is the dialogue going on there? I think that's really important and really compelling. Especially as we have, this whole area of like consciousness research as well. I think you've spoken to a couple neuroscientists who are in the consciousness fields. But you have like DiMaggio and Anil Seth and all these people kind of saying that the brain evolved to keep the body alive, and that's sort of homeostasis and physiological regulation are kind of underlying brain function. So I think this is a really interesting field to kind of push interoception research forward as well. And the psychedelic science as well. I think there's beginning to be a bit more of a focus on somatics and psychedelics. It's kind of new, I feel. But yeah, there's kind of a confluence, I would say, in different fields, with more direction towards the body.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up on that sort of psychedelics and somatics for a moment, and then come back to something you said a few minutes ago about how can we maybe come to a agreement on whether or not emotions can get blocked or stuck in the body, and what we mean when we say that. But yeah, so the psychedelics and somatics. So you said that's a kind of emerging. So what psychedelics and the research into that has quite a long history, even though it's had a resurgence recently. Was it more about cognition and mental states before? Is what you're saying is that now there's more interest in the bodily part of psychedelic experiences?
Yeah. I mean, around the time Michael Pollan's book came out in 2018, sort of the narrative was like psychedelics shut down the default mode network, and kind of allow for sort of more of a bottom-up perception to filter through. And now, yeah, and there was maybe a handful of studies on interception actually and psychedelics. So in 2015, there was a study on salvia and interception and how it can actually increase body trust. But really, I mean, just a handful. But it seems to be picking up a little bit. And next year, there will be a study results released about like the interceptive effects of psilocybin on anorexia. So that's a really interesting area, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of that kind of research. But yeah, it's taken a while, I think, for the focus to shift from brain mind, or like the relationship between brain mind, that sort of focus in psychedelic science, to like what is going on in the rest of the body, and maybe there's even an interoceptive component to the benefits of psychedelic therapy.
Mm, mm. Yes. So if what you're sort of saying, and I've heard other people say it as well, is that the reason why we have a brain is to it's in service of the body, and to help the body stay healthy. It's not just so that we can have all these wonderful thoughts and um, plans for the future and imagination and so on. It is really to keep the internal state of the body in good order. Yeah, so acknowledging that in therapeutic approaches that involve psychedelics as well. So again,
Right.
it's this below the neck thing that often gets ignored.
Yes, exactly.
Mental health research. I do agree with what you say about mindfulness as well, though, that it does already exist within mindful, because often mindfulness practices involve some breathing or heart focused meditations or body scans and so on. It seems like it's all there. It's just that the word mindfulness, we keep coming back to everything being in the brain.
Yeah, right.
So I'm jumping around a little bit, but that question you had about coming to an answer of whether emotions can get stuck in the body, that's maybe what triggered my interest in this topic from what I hear therapists talking about in their work. And I believe that that's a form of science itself. You get groups of therapists saying, this is what I've observed with my clients, and then they get together and they discuss it and they look for patterns and they develop their own kind of story around that. And then how can we see if that matches up with what's emerging in the scientific community? And that this I don't know if you've come across this phrase, interoceptive active inference.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so I think Anil Seth sort of had a paper on that, and Mark Solms and Lisa Barrett have used those kind of ideas that these kind of prediction of inner self felt feelings can be predictions of what we think are happening. So I think that's where we can hopefully come to an understanding of what is meant in the therapeutic world when we say emotions are getting stuck. That's my gut feeling, I should say, that it's like it's a translation thing. This is what the therapists mean when they say this. This is what the scientists mean when they say interoceptive active inference. Or there's a paper recently by Sahib Khalsa on PTSD and fear learning and the role of interoception. And I think he's talking about these interoceptive predictions become conditioned. So after you've had a potentially traumatic experience where some external stimuli becomes associated with the interoceptive prediction, and then for me, that's maybe what a stuck emotion is. It's a conditioned interoceptive prediction.
Yes. Yeah, I think I heard Lisa Feldman Barrett speak a little bit about this in a video a few months ago. And she said something like, she was talking about trauma healing, and she said, it's not the body that needs to heal, it's the brain's predictions that need to be updated. Which, yeah, I think you're right. It's a translation issue. And also a lot of people don't want to hear that, honestly. Like there's this language around really like literally implicating the body itself into trauma healing or emotional release. And I think this language really resonates with people. So yeah, it's interesting trying to figure out how to kind of communicate both at the same time without losing either audience.
It is really tricky. I've seen I really so admire Lisa Barrett's work and Mark Solms, and I feel like they're, that if you just draw a Venn diagram, they're pretty much overlapping, but there can be a jarring when two people are talking about something that leads to the communication breaking down. And these are, world experts in this topic. I feel that both, this is something I've been following on Twitter, those two scientists recently, and I feel that what they both really want to do is to empower people with knowledge from science, which is kind of what you want to do and what I want to do. But I feel sometimes we can get caught up in the minor details of our own definitions. So, Lisa saying that it's the brain that's doing all the controlling, but actually, she's also published a paper recently saying that the vagus nerve does some processing of itself of information from the body and the brain. It's almost got like a mini brain within itself, which then I'd say, well, that's, the vagus nerve is throughout the body. So is it still the brain that's doing it all, or is the body doing some of this?
Fair point.
Yeah. So
and the gut as well, the enteric nervous system, also its own brain, supposedly. So yeah, it's a really exciting time, honestly, with all of this. Yeah, figuring out how to communicate it, what language to use around it. So yeah, I'm on the same page as you in terms of trying to empower people. And also I hope that, like, my hope with the book is that people are inspired to read the research articles, not just the book itself, but like to really be inspired to dive into reading the science, because I don't know. I mean, interoception feels like very personally relevant too as a scientific subject. So I feel like maybe it will interest more people in like the research itself.
Yeah. So I will share the link to that. And I see you have also written lots of other interesting articles before this interview. I was looking at some of your other work. You've written a lot about language as well. Is that right? For Psyche, lots of sort of blogs and articles.
For the digital magazine that I was managing for a few years, that was, I guess there are maybe some articles about language, but it's kind of a wide range of topics in educational psychology. But like right now, I'm pretty focused on interoception and psychedelics. But yeah, the interest is not going away anytime soon.
Fantastic. I look forward to seeing your work as it evolves and develops. And are there any other kind of upcoming articles or events or news that you'd like to share with people before we wrap up?
So there will be an online launch for the book sometime this fall, which anybody and everybody is welcome to attend. And I'll probably announce that on Twitter or LinkedIn, so people are welcome to connect with me on either platform. And yeah, I would say if you want to read more of what I've written, also just visit my LinkedIn page, and I have links to like the Scientific American article and the Psyche magazine article. The articles for the Mind Foundation, everything is pretty much there in one place.
Great. And that just leaves me to thank you very much. I really enjoyed this conversation. It seems like you're very humble with your knowledge and just really open and to learning more, and to have this desire to learn more and share more. So I want to share my gratitude for your work. And if you're happy to come back maybe in a year's time and share your where you've got to next with the psychedelics and interoception work, then it'd be a pleasure to have you back on the channel.
Thank you, Ian. Yeah, I'm super grateful for your work as well and for the invitation. And yeah, hope to be back soon.
Please remember to subscribe to the InnerSense channel for more information about the role of your bodily sensations and tips for using bodily awareness to improve your well-being.